Welcome back to Popular Preparedness, where you and I are the greatest threat the world has ever seen. Yes, the very same people out there talking about how farting cows are destroying the planet. Too much dirtiness and too much dangerousness coming from those bovines. But those very same people are saying things like, there are too many people on the planet. So the only thing more dangerous than a farting cow is me and you. We're seeing shortages all over the planet. We are seeing problems cropping up. And a lot of it just begs the question, is it all by accident? Is it all by happenstance? Or is there something a little more nefarious going on? We've been building up this pyramid of cards for many, many years. Back when I was in college in 2002, I think it was, I took a business class and we talked about just-in-time delivery systems. And one of the things I remember back then they said was that you can't take this too far. If you cut too much of the reserve out, if there's a shock to the system, the whole system will collapse. And so what have we done for the past 20 years? We've squeezed every inefficiency out of the system to the point where it was so efficient that there was no buffer whatsoever in the system. And then what happened last year happened. And everything started to cascade. And we've just been seeing this row of dominoes falling over one after the next. And every time it starts to recover a little bit, it seems like some person comes along and gives it another shove. We're seeing these shoves coming out from the country across the sea. We're seeing these kind of shoves coming from Australia. We're seeing these kind of shoves coming from the UK, European Union, Canada. It's like they're trying to bring as much production offline as possible. And when it comes to shipping, we're seeing states like California making these decisions that 60% of the trucks going onto the docks aren't allowed to go on the docks anymore. And they're stacking their shipping containers in ways that don't make any sense. Like, why would you do that? So many options on how to fix the backup that we have, and yet someone just did a tour of the port of Los Angeles, a 3-hour tour, and they said they only saw, I think it was like 10 containers moved off the ships, that there were dozens of cranes and only a few of them were even operating, and they were operating super slow because there's just nowhere to put the containers on the ground. They can't get them off the port of LA and the port of Long Beach. They can't move them out of the port area to somewhere else. So many of the chassis that trucks can use are being used as temporary storage, where the shipping containers aren't being offloaded off the chassis because they can't offload them because there's nowhere to put them, and so they can't reuse the chassis to haul another container out. And there's trucker shortages because there's only union truckers are allowed to. It's just like someone just came along and just thought that the system needed another shove. Because there's just too many people on the planet. And people need to pay for the crimes that they've committed against this planet. So whether we're looking at just the whole supply chain just falling over and then other people just out of their ineptitude causing it to be worse, or whether there's some intentionality behind the shoves that are coming, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we need to talk very seriously about how the shortages are not the problem. They are a symptom of the problem. The symptom of the problem, which is that we have been thinking far too much about short-term planning, short-term thinking. We aren't thinking about next year. We're not thinking about 2 years down the road, 10 years down the road. We're thinking about the next quarter. Our businesses only live for what's happening in the next quarter, and the quarter after that, and the quarter after that. If you start talking about 5 years out from them, most corporate officers realize that they're not going to be in their position anymore. They're going to crank up the earnings of that company, and then they are going to bail ship and pass the buck to the next person. And hopefully the hot potato explodes on the next person and not them. That's what we've seen companies doing, and we're squeezing out all the margin, all the buffer in the system, and there's no thought about what happens when there's a catastrophic failure in the system. There's no resiliency left because that wasn't being rewarded. If the stock price went up, they got rewarded. If the earnings this quarter went up, they got rewarded. Not preparing the company to weather a downturn in the economy, preparing the company to deal with some of their suppliers going out of business. The fact is, you go back 60, 70 years, it was standard operating procedure for companies to have 3 suppliers for every critical product they have. Many times now, companies are dealing with 1 supplier for critical parts. Sometimes they get 2, but most times they're looking at only 1 supplier. And when that supplier fails to deliver, the system goes down. So what does that mean for us? The thing is that we need to create more resilient systems. Us feeding ourselves, us clothing ourselves, us having what we need for our homes, we need to build our little system where we're getting our supplies from dependable sources that aren't going to cut out on us. And the simple fact is the box store down the street, the box store in your town is no longer a dependable place to get your products from. Is it a convenient place to get your products from? Yes. Is it a cost-effective place to get your products from? Oftentimes, yes. But is it going to be dependable in the long term going forward? And the answer is we're looking at real shortages, and the answer may be no. If the whole system continues to break down like it is, we need to make sure that we're able to source food, that we're able to source everything else we need, medical supplies, clothing, heating, energy, the things you critically need to live, you and your family. We need to make sure that whatever we can source ourselves, that's a practical thing to do. Find local farmers in your area. Find people who you can partner up with to make products. Your employer may not be a good thing in the future. They may lay you off at the drop of a hat. We've seen that in the last few months. Is your job dependable? If it's not, can you become more self-employed? Can you care for yourself? Your employer in a high inflation situation may not hike your pay as fast as the store is hiking the prices on the store, if you can even get those products at all. Whereas if you're in business for yourself, it's possible that you might be able to keep up better with inflation. Self-employed people tend to do better in a high inflation environment than employees. That's just fact. If the whole system comes down and people start getting laid off like it's 2008 or like previous recessions or as bad as the Depression, you may be very, very grateful that you are your employer because you can take a pay cut without actually laying yourself off. Can we, because storing up supplies, we're advocating going up and out and stocking up. But that's a Band-Aid. That's the truth. It's only a Band-Aid. What we need to do is think longer term, growing your own food, partnering with other people to grow your own food, finding alternative sources of energy that, like wood. Wood is renewable. You can get that locally in a lot of places. And if you're heating that way, you can make sure that you're actually taken care of. There's other solutions out there for all sorts of different things. But what can you do for yourself? Being more independent and being more self-reliant may be very critical to get through what's coming down the pike. What's coming down the pike? I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know for sure. If I did, I'd make a killing in the stock market, okay? But I'm just like you. I can only see what I think is going to happen. I can extrapolate trends that are happening right now and say, when the Department of Transportation in the United States says that this supply chain crunch is going to extend into 2022, do I think it's going to solve itself next month? No, because the people who are generally being all sunshine and roses are saying it's going to be at least another 5 months or so before this even starts to sort out. And we're having industry people talking about it's going to be longer than that. Shipping people are saying that we're talking about 2023 possibly before shipping gets back to normal. If that's the case, maybe that's what's going to happen in the future. But if there's only a chance that's going to happen in the future, shouldn't we insure ourselves? But buying food is only a Band-Aid. We need to solve the problem beneath. If the shipping containers get all sorted out in the next number of months, and yet the companies keep making the same mistakes and not preparing for a rainy day, we're just going to have another crisis like this again. And then again, until companies get better about having a buffer, having more resilient systems that are more expensive to upkeep. And what's that going to do to the stock market? All those gains that were squeezed out at the cost of insurance policies in the past, well, they're going to be taken back because they weren't gains, really. They were risks. And when risks are taken and a situation like this happens, there's going to be losers. And when those companies lose, the employees that work for them lose. We're entering into dangerous times. We're entering into what appears to be another recession, or as some people say, a depression. And in that case, a lot of people lose their jobs. High inflation situation, that has a lot of implications too. I don't know what's coming, but a lot of things seem to be coming our way that are not looking all that great. We need to build more resilient systems and make sure that our families are taken care of. That's all I have to say about that. This is Steve Poplar of Poplar Preparedness. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, and I will see you again tomorrow.